So you think that you can tell us how to live our lives, never questioning the source from which your moral code derives. You think that suffering is part of some great plan that's been devised. I wonder, what will it take for you to start opening your eyes? I wonder.
Holy crap, they're stomping.
Yeah.
I don't know how secure this building is. What if it all comes down? Welcome to the Atheist Experience. I'm Matt Dillahunty. Joining me this week, my good friend, Dr. Darrel Ray.
Good to have you here, guys.
The author of The God Virus, author of Sex and God, creator of Recovering from Religion, the Secular Therapy Project, the Hotline Project, and lots of porn that you will never see. How are you?
I'm fine. I love Shelley Siegel.
Yeah.
She was at my house about 3 months ago and gave a house concert at my house.
She was at my house a few months ago, too.
But did she give a house concert at your
Oh,
house?
yeah. She and I sat around and jammed, and then I gave her my drumstick.
Well, okay. My drumstick's bigger than yours.
Oh, I said strumstick, but, as long as we're measuring. Hi, Shelley. We love you.
Yes.
Yeah, so, you came down, essentially, you drove straight through and got here Wednesday night.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Then you did on Thursday, you and I did Secular Sexuality with Christy.
Yeah.
And then Friday you did Truth Wanted. And
Right.
you went to San Antonio to party with some people who are dubious at best.
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding. I love all my fact friends and all the San Antonio guys. And now you're back and you did Truth Wanted, or you did Talk Heathen earlier.
Right.
Now we're doing Atheist Experience. How much vacation are you taking when we're done with you?
I think I'm going to go home and sleep for a week after this. You guys have worn me out.
Oh, it's great. Well, we're glad to have you. Today's Sunday, June 30th, unless, of course, you're watching this later when it's not. The Atheist Community of Austin, you can find out more information at atheist-community.org. There's a bunch of information, announcements. There's some special events coming up, but I don't have any of that right now. We got a line full of callers. There's a couple of things that we want to talk about. And one is that Recovering from Religion is doing something special this November, and I want to make sure you tell everybody. And I'm sure they'll put a graphic up where people can go to recoveringfromreligion.org.
Actually, it's September.
September,
right.
Yes. If you show up in November, you missed it.
21 through 20.
Why don't we just do it in September and November, and that way I can be right?
Well,
why won't you let me be right, Darrel?
I like to piss you off.
I know.
Yeah.
All right, in September, the 20th, 21st, 21st, 22nd?
Yeah, 21st, 22nd, we're doing what we're calling an excursion, Reconnect with Your Nature, and it's in the beautiful mountains of North Carolina.
Yes.
Where people will be able to come and talk and look at each other and talk about recovery issues and talk about how to reconnect with their sexuality, reconnect with nature. Instead of looking at the sun and thinking God made a beautiful sunrise, you look at the sun and say, wow, that's the rotation of the earth. We're actually going to have an astronomer there. Mandisa Thomas is going to be there. We have 4 secular therapists there. It's going to be really cool people just coming to talk about recovery issues. Anybody can come. Families can come. Couples can come. We even got we'll have child care activities. It's going to be a very relaxing weekend with lots of good food and obviously really good company. And
I haven't verified my schedule yet, but after you told me that Gail was coming and Shannon was coming and Mandisa was coming, I was like, why the hell have I not booked my time there yet? You may well see me sneak in there.
We would take you in a heartbeat. Gail's, of course, Shannon Nebo it's her idea. And she and Gail have worked their butts off to make this happen.
No. If I could get Shannon to move to Austin, she's one of the hardest working, sweetest, make shit happen people I've ever met.
She is.
And if I could get her to move to Austin, we would be making use of her here.
Yeah, we wouldn't let that happen. We've chained her down.
Okay. Dibs. You can't call dibs on people, Darrel. That's not fair.
Well, with Shannon, I will give it my best shot.
So anyway, special shout out to Shannon as well.
Yeah.
Apart from the fact that, this is an excursion, call it whatever you want, it's getting back in touch with your nature.
Right.
And, we're in a position where religion often denies human nature and makes people feel guilty or imposes shame upon people for that.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But you mentioned something mildly funny to me about this the other day, and that is you can show up and just spend the whole time in your room. It's fine.
Yeah,
There's not like a set schedule. You are not going to be...
It's not a church camp.
At 11 a.m., we're going to talk about how we don't believe in Jesus. And then at 11:45, we'll start lunch. And after lunch, we'll talk about how you should probably have some sex.
Yeah, no, it's not going to be like that.
Either with yourself or somebody.
You come and do whatever you want. You can even go to your room and jack off. We don't care.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, like you were going to stop me. All right. On that note, anybody who's interested, by the way, we've promoted recovering from religion here almost since, almost before it existed, because you and I talked about this a little bit when you had the beginnings of the idea, and you were actively starting working on this and the psychotherapy project and all the hotline stuff. But I remember way back in the past, there was Dr. Marlene Winnell.
Right, yeah.
You had a conversation with her. I had a conversation with her, and then the three of us talked, and I'm sure you guys talked about. I don't want to insert myself in the narrative. I didn't do any work at all with regard to founding, recovering from religion, or anything else. I just happened to be in the right place at the right time and saw this is a really amazing thing. And one of the things that Marlene kind of woke me up to was something she calls religious trauma syndrome.
Right.
Which, while it's not in the DSM, it's you've talked about it before.
Well, trauma is in the DSM.
Right.
PTSD is in the DSM, and what the DSM doesn't talk about is what are the antecedents, what are the causes of trauma. And religion, what Dr. Marlene Winnell and others of us psychologists in the field are saying, religion contributes to trauma just like war contributes to trauma, and child abuse contributes to trauma. In fact, oftentimes they're all related. So let's not give a pass to religion. Religion is a major cause of trauma. And that's why we started, part of the reason we started Recover from Religion, to give people a place to come and talk, discover with the help they could get, and then offer them that help, or at least give them channels to get that help. Religious trauma is an insidious thing for people that are coming out of religion sometimes. I mean, at least in my observation at Recover from Religion, we talk to people all the time who say something like, I was beaten by my parents when they caught me masturbating, or I was beaten by my parents because I didn't learn my Bible lessons, and lots of child abuse. I mean, that's child abuse. But it's also religion. If the parents didn't believe that crap, they wouldn't be beating their kids. And so the trauma comes into them as adults, and they don't know what to do with it when they leave the church. Now, the problem is they beat their own kids. And now they turn around and say,
I turned out all right.
Yeah.
No, you didn't. You're still hitting people.
Yeah, exactly. So part of the reason I'm talking to you here today is I want to educate people that religion causes trauma. Now, if you were raised in some kind of a Episcopalian or Unitarian, you're probably not going to be traumatized. But I'll tell you, if you were raised in a Baptist church where they believed spare the rod, spoil the child, and you were beaten for not eating your peas, or you were beaten for not learning your Bible lessons, you may well be bringing trauma into your adulthood. And
I can say, by the way, since I've talked about my parents before, I was never beaten for masturbating. I was never beaten for... I don't think I recall ever being beaten for not eating my food, and certainly not... I was, however, beaten on occasion when I misbehaved, and for the longest time, I just accepted that that's the way it was. I don't suffer personally, that I'm aware of, any after effects from it, but I'm vehemently opposed to it. I'm fucking tattoo, never hit a child, never hit anybody.
Right.
We don't have to specify with a child. Don't hit people. But for the people out there who might be religious, who are like, oh, here we go. These atheists are sitting here talking about religion's causing trauma. Clearly, they don't have the first clue what they're talking about, because religion is a force for good, and it's what holds the world together, and it's all about love, and it's all about this other stuff. Allow me to just calmly and politely suggest that you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. Because while you may not have, like when I was spanked and I say I don't suffer anything from it, that doesn't mean that somebody else who was punished in the same way that I was doesn't suffer from that. The fact that religions can inspire people and make use of people to do good things or positive things doesn't mean that there's not also negative baggage there. And you're not the person who decides whether or not somebody else has been emotionally traumatized.
Right, yeah.
The fact of the matter is maybe your church is relatively fine. But when your foundation is based on, oh, it's God's way or you're terrible, and when you talk about God's way, it is an archaic notion that takes no advantage of what we've learned in the last couple thousand years with regard to interpersonal relationships, with regard to mental health. We need to stop putting a stigma on mental health issues, and the churches are, by and large, incredibly responsible for that stigma by saying that, oh, well, that's demon possession, or you've given over to sin, and God's given you over to reprobate mind, and things like that. Your religion may not be the worst. Your religion may not even be all that bad. And if that's the case, then we're probably not talking about your religion. But we might be. And so taking a minute to think about how the things you've learned have affected you, what sort of baggage you carry around in your daily life, might make it a little easier to understand when we talk to people who say, I was treated this way because of religion. And please do us a favor. Don't call in to apologize on behalf of other people. Oh, I'm so sorry about the way you treated. I appreciate that. I appreciate that you have empathy and that you're not a shitty person, that you're not a jackass. $10. But, sorry, as an amusing side note back in here, I appreciate the fact that you might not feel that way. But this isn't necessarily about how you feel. And there are people who have been ostracized and their families have lost everything.
Right.
And what you've got with the Recovering from Religion Foundation is a helpline.
Right. And a chat line.
And you and I put up a video just yesterday. It'll be public to everybody tomorrow because I'm slightly... this evening, I will go switch it either during the show or after the show. Darrel and I talked about all this, specifically about how people could potentially volunteer in the way they could.
Right, yeah.
And I'm told we've got one of your volunteers here.
Yeah, Gwen is here to talk about what she does and also talk a little bit about religious trauma because I think she's got some insight into that.
Outstanding. Well, Gwen, welcome to the show. You're on with Matt and Darrel.
Hi, Matt. Hi, Darrel. How are you? Can you hear me okay?
Yep, thanks for calling.
We hear you perfectly.
Excellent. Yes, I started volunteering probably just about 6 weeks ago. I'd heard about it, but didn't really think I was qualified because I hadn't been an atheist long enough or whatever. But
and got your atheist card punched
Nobody
yet.
can talk to anybody about religion until they've done this shit as long as I have. No, wait. And actually, it's good that you mentioned that because the new co-host on the Atheist Experience, Jenna, hasn't been an atheist for a great deal of time, and yet, you know, if anybody has something to offer to other people, so I'm really glad you volunteered.
Yeah.
Tell us more about it.
Yeah, so it's been great. The training was amazing. The vetting process was great because not only did they make sure I was a good fit for them, but they made sure this was a good fit for me.
Right.
So I really appreciated that whole process. And the ongoing support has been amazing. I mostly do chats. It's great because I do them when I'm available to do them. And it's just been amazing the variation of people that you're able to help us. And at times even as I'm dealing with my own recovery from religion, there'll be a chat about something that just resonates with me. And I go away going, wow, not only did I get to help someone, but that helped me as well by reminding me that yes, extreme religion can really squash who you are as a person.
Let's be honest. I've been hosting this show for almost 15 years. It's kind of my therapy. I get stuff out of these conversations as well.
Yes. Yeah. Well, it's amazing. I had a chat just recently, and she was talking about how she struggled with finding her identity as a woman after the teaching that she had been through. Mm-hmm. And that's something that I find I struggle with as well. And I was talking to my aunt who's in her 70s, and she's still struggling with that. And we just had this great conversation about how what people don't always understand is in your very extreme religious beliefs, you are not a person. Your identity is completely submerged, especially if you're a woman. Your entire focus is to support your husband, to support Christ, to care for your children. And it becomes very hard to figure out what do I want? What do I want to do? And I will say I was never spanked for masturbating or anything like that. I was instead shamed so much that I was in my late 40s.
Wait, women masturbate too? Oh my gosh, I'm learning something new every day for the benefit of our callers. Anyway, I'm sorry to interrupt that.
And Gwen knows what she's talking about. She was a minister's wife. She hasn't mentioned that
Yes.
one.
Oh, wow.
Yes, I was a Southern Baptist preacher's wife, and I taught the purity class for the teenagers.
Whoa.
And we handed out bars of ivory soap to invite them to talk about how they can have a pure life. I have a lot to make up for.
That's the other reason I'm doing this. It's kind of, I was Baptist, and so there's no real concept of penance in the same way. But this is penance for me, and thank you for doing yours.
Yes, exactly. So, and and it's little things too. I mean, just the other day, I was been on a road trip with my dad, and he's still very, very religious and very disappointed in me because I'm not. And I'm driving down this country road and just feeling this joy as we're seeing the mountains and the trees, and I'm having this great time with my dad. And I just have this thought. I'm like, I just wish my parents could understand how free and happy I am now that I don't have all this baggage of religion. And the immediate thought was that their first comment, if I were to say that, would be, she's not going to think it was worth it when she's burning in hell for all eternity.
Yeah.
And, it just brought a downer to that moment. And, and so I am signed out for the weekend in September. I cannot wait to get there. It's going to be amazing. And because you just keep discovering things that you didn't even realize were there that come from that training, especially when you've grown up in it your entire life.
Right. And you mentioned fear of hell. That is probably the underlying foundation for religious trauma syndrome. So many children have been terrorized by their parents and by their religion. You're going to hell because, you didn't learn your Bible lesson. It's not just spanking, it's the browbeating that children get by especially extremely religious people.
There's another aspect of the threat of hell. Now I've said many times that I never really felt that. I knew it was there, but, I walked down the aisle at the age of 5 at a revival, so I was saved. And so there was kind of it was kind of there on the back burner but I'm not going to have to deal with that. And it may be that I was a terrible child who, wasn't properly realizing how this impacted other people. Or it may just be that I was surrounded by nothing but church people. Almost all my friends were members of the church. Yeah. But I've heard from people who indoctrinated with that concept of hell, suffered for years, not because of a fear that they would go to hell, but a fear that their friends would go to hell.
Yeah, right.
So just getting somebody to buy into this particular narrative, and now you need to be saved, and it gave kids like me the notion of, oh, well, now you don't have to be afraid of hell anymore. And I was just like, okay, well, then I don't have to be afraid of hell. And I just kept on going. And other people immediately recognized, hang on a minute, my best friend's going to go to hell because they're Jewish or they're pagan or they're Hindu or whatever else. That can't be overlooked. You as a parent might think that, I'm not mad at my parents or the preachers because they were honestly trying to do their best with what they knew and understood. But they're still doing harm. The road to hell is paved with good intentions, especially the fear of hell.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah. One of the most painful moments I have remembering is when I had showed a Billy Graham video to my kids, and my 7-year-old daughter woke up with nightmares because her friends were going to hell.
Yeah.
And I could not console her. And thankfully, she's not an atheist. She's an atheist now. Although when I told her I was an atheist, she was just like, now? You couldn't have figured this out when I was a kid.
It's funny that a Billy Graham video did that, because it's not like Billy Graham was largely a fire and brimstone hellfire. As a matter of fact, my understanding is that at least later in his life, he didn't believe in a literal hell, that he was an advocate for annihilation theory.
Yeah, I don't know.
And when somebody as, I don't know, milk toast, I guess.
Yeah, well, I think that's what goes to what you were saying earlier, Matt, is that for a lot of people, even in Southern Baptist churches where I was in, they may never have that level. But when a family takes it to an intense level, even something as milquetoast as a Billy Graham video that's all about the positive side, they have so indoctrinated their family and their lives that they clearly see that the opposite side of this is hell for the people that are in their lives.
Yeah.
And so, even if you, and if you made it through and you didn't have some of this trauma, I'm happy for you.
Yeah.
But there is an element in many of even your mainline churches that there's just an intense trauma that comes from a very intense application of the teaching.
Right. Yeah. Thanks for calling in, Gwen. I appreciate you giving us your perspective.
And aren't you happy that you don't have to sit through another Lottie Moon offering service?
Yes. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. I was a storyteller. I told the Lottie Moon stories to get everybody to give. That was my job. So I haven't heard that in forever.
You guys are sharing some secret language.
It is. And we're not going to explain it. You guys can go Google Lottie Moon.
Exactly.
Well, I hope.
Thanks a bunch, Gwen. We really appreciate what you're doing. And I'm glad especially that you took a chance even when you thought, well, maybe this is too early for me, because you shined a really good light on the fact that not only is this something that benefits other people, but it can benefit the people involved.
Right. Our training will help anybody. I'm convinced
Absolutely.
of that. Yeah.
Well, thanks for your time, and keep volunteering. And if you or Darrel or somebody else want to reach out back to us again to promote this or talk about something interesting that's going on, by all means, give us a call.
Okay.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks, Gwen.
Bye-bye.
So can I
Yes.
let people know where to find us?
Yes.
recoverfromreligion.org. If you want to call into our chat line or call in or chat in, you can, and just hit the chat button. If you want to come to the excursion, just go to the recoverfromreligion.org and hit the excursion button, and all the details are there. Thanks for letting me talk about it here.
Yeah, and for people who maybe I don't know if self-diagnosis, or if you're convinced that you are suffering from PTSD or religious trauma syndrome or something along those lines, what kind of things, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, but what kind of things might they be looking for in their life to let them know that, maybe this is an issue that I should address?
Well, when you're religious, you may be, for example, depressed. You may be suffering from a PTSD related to the religion and not even know it, because you're surrounded by it. Once you leave, or even when you start thinking about leaving, the full weight of that comes back down on you. And oftentimes, whether we call it religious trauma or not, I'm not going to sit here and diagnose trauma.
Right.
But I will say depression is a very common thing to happen to people when they leave. They're oftentimes depressed while they're still in religion, and they may be doing self-destructive things while they're in religion. And I won't go into details. You can guess what some of those would be. Alcohol would be one. But once you leave, you go into depression. You don't know what to do because you've lost your family, you've lost your community, you've lost your sense of being. You don't know what meaning's about. I mean, all these things happen at the same time. So hopefully you'll recognize this in yourself. It can be, I can't sleep anymore. I'm having recurring dreams about hell all the time. Or OCD, I can't focus. I'm constantly being distracted, and I didn't used to. Any of those things might be symptoms of religious trauma. But again, don't self-diagnose. Nobody should. Even a psychologist should not self-diagnose. I don't self-diagnose myself. Well, yeah, I do. I'm perfect, so there I don't have to worry about that.
I can vouch for Darrel's perfection.
And if you do need help, go to the Secular Therapy Project.
Yeah.
Go to seculartherapy.org and find a therapist to help you. Don't try to self-medicate. Drugs aren't a good way to do it. Non-prescription. Alcohol is not a good way to do it. Find somebody to help you through it, and you'll be so much better.
So we'll get the links added to the show and everything else, but it's recoveringfromreligion.org, seculartherapy.org, and the hotline number is
1-844-I-DOUBT-IT.
Yeah, and for those who aren't aware, maybe you're not a skeptic, maybe you've never looked it up, doubt is D-O-U-B-T. Because I can imagine how some people might try to spell that, and who knows what hotline you'll get there. All right. We want to move on to some calls.
All right.
All right, let's see what we can do. And actually, we're going to start continuing the theme. We've got Michelle in California who's calling in with a question for you.
Okay, Michelle, thanks for calling. What can I help you with?
Hey, Dr. Ray. I talked to you about 4 or 5 years ago.
Wow.
I used to accept patients through the Secular Therapist Project when I lived in East Tennessee in the Bible Belt.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
How far East Tennessee? Like Johnson City or?
Elizabethton?
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
Oh, Johnson City.
I love that area.
Yeah. Well, I got my... I went to Vanderbilt in Nashville, so I used to go over to that area quite a bit.
Yeah, it's a great place to visit, but I lived there for 15 years.
Wow.
And I was raised secular. So it finally, I don't know why it took me 15 years, but now I live in California. I've lived here for about 4 years.
Now you're a proper secularist.
Right, many, many years. I'm now the medical director. I'm a psychiatrist. I'm the medical director of a county here in Northern California.
Okay.
And I'm wondering about, is there a way to accept these patients? Well, ironically, without a church-state violation. And if you have any ideas about that, working with government entities.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure what you're saying or what you're asking.
So one of the things.
Well, okay. We have like LGBT outreach, immigrant outreach. We reach out to like the Muslim community, religious minority outreach, but we don't have any non-religious outreach.
I see. Okay.
Yeah. So.
Well, it's actually.
I'm not a therapist. I'm a psychiatrist. But.
Well, I'm not a lawyer. But I can't
Yeah.
imagine how there could possibly be a church-state separation issue with a secular government allowing secular therapists to take on clients.
Yeah. Maybe.
Oh, people can throw their little hissy fits all they want, but I'm talking, as a matter of fact, if any of my lawyer friends are listening, I don't know, Jeff, are you there? Andrew, somebody, they might have more information. But actually, if you're actually worried about the legal aspects of it, I'd recommend you can either contact American Atheist Legal Team, Freedom from Religion Foundation, one of those, because neither one of us are going to.
But you're working for a government entity, and you're saying, can we specifically have an outreach? Right. I really don't see a problem with that. If you were having a specific outreach for Baptists, that might be a problem. But secular is secular. I don't think that's an issue. But I would ask.
It's not like secular is yet another religion or even opposition to religion.
Right.
It's just the absence of religion.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And then what would that look like? I mean, how would, say, a county go about, referring or getting referrals from the Secular Therapist Project?
Well, you'd have to get specific people who are licensed to apply for the Secular Therapy Project. And once they're licensed and once they're in our database, they've been vetted, then they will specifically be able to accept referrals from us. In fact, their name, it'll come directly to them. We wouldn't send it to an agency. We'd send it more to an individual. And then, of course, they can do the bureaucracy they need to get the client through the agency. We actually have other agencies that do that already.
There is an interesting legal question about it, and just playing armchair lawyer, and I will, in fact, consult with some later. Let's imagine that you are putting together a service for your local community that would connect patients with potential therapists. I don't see a necessary problem. I don't see a violation of religion and government separation to say, I would prefer a therapist who shares my religious views, because that's not now the state saying, okay, we're going to connect you with a Baptist if you're a Catholic or a Catholic if you're a Baptist. It's just the state saying, what kind of therapist would you prefer? And if somebody actually has a preference for a Methodist-based therapist, I feel that they should have every right to do that, and I don't think it's necessarily a violation for the government to say, hey, we're going to recommend these people. It'd be just like check boxes. It's different if the government is saying, we are going to set up a therapy project, and we are going to push everybody towards Scientologist. That'd be a mistake.
I could see somebody calling your agency and say, I think I'm potentially a victim of religious trauma syndrome. I'd like a therapist that could help me with that. And of course, that's not going to be a religious therapist. But I don't know.
And actually, I've had patients, mostly schizophrenic patients, who are religious, and they've had their pastors tell them, you don't need all these medications.
Right.
And, they actually do.
They need them bad. You're right.
Yeah.
We see that way too often.
That's
ministers undermining the
Yeah,
psychiatrists.
You just need to get right with God.
Yeah, and the patient comes and says, my pastor tells me, I don't need these meds. And 99.9% of these patients say, I got to find another church.
Good,
I'm like,
good.
that's the right answer.
That's the right
I
answer.
don't tell them that, but...
Well, Michelle, have your staff, any of your secular staff, or tell them it's available, and we do the vetting. You can send anybody you want to
Okay.
us, but we will accept them or reject them based upon what they show us.
That's actually,
Okay.
I know that what you're describing happens, but I find it really annoying because there are counselors, therapists, psychologists, psychotherapists, psychologists, psychiatrists, and not all of them are able to prescribe meds. So why the fuck is a preacher who doesn't have any of the medical training to tell you what prescription you should have?
Yeah.
That's just weird.
Dude, you're totally preaching to the choir here.
That's how you get them to sing.
Are you a member of the Psychotherapy Project now, Michelle?
This was like 5 years ago.
Oh, okay.
A couple of years before I left Tennessee. I'm not sure. I would be completely on board with, continuing that.
Okay.
And they could, continue to see me at the county. I would be 100%
Well,
on board.
if we didn't kick you out, then you're still in there. So you're probably still in there.
I should be. I'm
Just change your address and contact
100%
stuff.
secular.
Yep.
Okay. Seculartherapist.org.
Yeah. You'll have to go in.
Psychotherapy.org.
Okay.
Seculartherapy.org and make sure you're still in there. If you can't find yourself or you forgot your password or something, you can reset it, or you can call me and I can help find you, or you can call Dr. Caleb Black, who's our director for that program. Thanks for calling in, though. Good question.
Yeah, thank you, Michelle. We really appreciate it.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
All right. So we could keep going on this theme, but I think we need to have a discussion about some gods.
Oh, definitely.
and
Which
then
God
can
are we
get
going to
back.
talk about?
I don't know. I'm going to guess. Oh, let's go with a Trinitarian one.
Okay.
So Rob and Georgia, you're on with Matt and Darrel Ray, and you think the Trinity is crystal clear and not confusing.
Yes. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay. Calling about the Trinity and the Clergy Project. As far as the Trinity, as I understand it, I think I'm in a similar position to you, Matt, religion-wise. I was studying to be a preacher. I've actually been a wandering preacher for most of my adult life. I'm neuroatypical, which has to do with the Clergy Project. But as far as the Trinity, I understand God as maximally powerful. I understand Yeshua as a limited form of God. It seems there are certain things one can't do if they're all powerful, and to do those things, they would need to limit themselves and kind of separate out their consciousness. And I understand the Holy Spirit as actions of God that affect humanity or the universe.
So here's the thing. The Trinity, which was essentially invented in 325 CE.
Exactly, yeah.
Is the notion that God the Father, God the Son, and God the Spirit are both simultaneously independent and one. And that's just a logical contradiction. So when you talk about understanding the Holy Spirit as the works of God, well, I do works. So if you were to look at the works that I do, you would have no justification for claiming that those works are an independent agent that is both co-equal with me and independent from me. That's where the confusion comes in.
So this is kind of a silly example.
Mm-hmm.
I guess there was an anime I watched when I was little that it seems most people my age watched, Dragon Ball Z, and one of the characters, Piccolo, would occasionally divide his body into two. His power became limited. It was never more than how strong he was when he was together, but there were certain times when separating himself and weakening himself was beneficial. When he was separated, there wasn't conscious awareness of what the other part of him was experiencing. And I think the only real difference I see with El Allah Yahweh is that El would be consciously aware of all of the experience. Yeshua would be aware of its experience, and the Holy Spirit, which I actually don't understand, but I just view as separated in a similar way. I have no idea what level of awareness it would have.
Yeah, while I wasn't like a Dragon Ball Z fan, first of all, what you're describing is sometimes the two are one and sometimes the two are independent. And that's not the same as what the doctrine is regarding the Trinity. On the other hand, I think that if we are going to anime, cartoons, and fictions to try to come up with an explanation, why aren't we just like citing the Wonder Twins? The fact that we can create a cartoon of something and make it make sense, at least in a limited sense, doesn't mean that we have any demonstration that there's a Trinitarian or triune God.
I agree with that. Even if I can make it make sense to myself, that doesn't mean it makes sense in a physical, materialistic way. So I guess I just have a belief in
I think it doesn't.
Something.
For the specific definition, I think it doesn't matter whether it's materialistic or physical. Even just as an abstract concept, it violates the laws of logic, the laws of identity, and so this notion that there are three agents that are actually always one agent and always three independent agents, that sets up a logical contradiction. And I, as I pointed out, I mean, this concept did not exist. And actually, the primary verse that people have cited for the Trinity is generally viewed as a late century or maybe second, third century interpolation, where it's called the Jonin comma, and so there's a passage there that in the oldest and best manuscripts has one line, which in later manuscripts has two lines, which is where they added, and these three are one, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit type thing. At the end of the day, though, it's kind of, for me, the concept doesn't make sense, and I find it absurd. But that's not really the measure, because let's say you could come up with a way to say, here's how the Trinity makes sense. I remember as a Southern Baptist having it described as how one man could be both a father, a son, and a brother. But that's still just one person. It's not three people. But they would use examples like that. Yeah. And then they would go to even more abstract things of, everything comes in threes. You need three legs on a stool for it to stand. And if you look, like here, my finger is divided into three separate portions. And then there's my finger, my hand, and my wrist. And then there's my hand, my upper arm, or my lower arm and my upper arm. Then there's my head, my torso, and my legs. Look, threes are everywhere. And the thing is, you can do that with pretty much any number. Hey, look, twos are everywhere. I have two eyes, two nostrils, two ears. I have a right side and a left side. Maybe God is a binary God. The big thing is, even if you could make sense of it, that doesn't mean that it's in any way real, which is the part that I care about. It's just a lot easier to not believe it's real as long as the shit doesn't make sense.
And I think it's absolutely relevant that it literally wasn't doctrine for 300 years. Yeah. 300 years.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty...
That does make sense.
And it's a Catholic doctrine primarily, and the Protestants just kind of kept going with it. But it's very originally within the Catholic.
Well, everything was originally the Catholic.
Right. That's not quite. No, there's other things like the Arianism that had some. There's some other traditions that probably bleached into
mostly kind of vanished. But,
yeah, right.
But yeah. Anyway, Rob, I appreciate the call. Hopefully I appreciate you trying to clear the Trinity up, but. Even if you could, that alone wouldn't convince us that there's a God, and I don't think we actually cleared the Trinity up.
Okay, that's fair. I wanted to say real quick before it gets to the end of the call, I actually think I do desire to let go of my religious experience, except they are so seemingly real. For instance, when I talk about El, I get quite a feeling of presence. I'm actually shaking somewhat now. And I feel as if that is from fear of a presence. And I also understand that intimidation is no way for a loving God to guide its people. so I can accept the idea that that's my internal fears. And also, being religious is how I justify an aspect of how I was born.
Well,
And
have you watched? Are you a big movie fan at all, Rob? Have you seen a bunch of movies in your life?
no, not really.
Okay. So the religious experience that you're talking about, I had similar experiences when I was in the church. I'd feel, the Holy Spirit when we sing and stuff, goosebumps and a feeling of elation and euphoria. And of course, I found that I would have those experiences in other ways, from secular music, from art, from drugs, from sex, etc. I've been in love with people to the point where if I think about them, I just feel good, like I'm in a pretty good mood today. But I'm sorry, now I can't think of it straight about anything. But like, I also have seen movies, both fantasy narratives where there's a good guy and a bad guy, and I've been viscerally angry at the bad guy and what that person did, despite the fact that I know that this is just a character being played in a fiction. And I've watched horror movies where it's about demons, demon possession and stuff like that. And I've felt eerie and spooked and whatever else, despite the fact that I have no reason to think any of that is true or real. And I wonder if the experiences that you and I have had, and yours are going to be different from mine, that give us these feelings. The fact that we feel something doesn't mean that the item that we're focused on is in any way real. That is all about who we are and what we've been trained to be afraid of, what we've come to learn to love or respect or admire or feel happy about.
And just remember,
the guest host today, I didn't know who was hosting at all when I called in, but as it's about religious sexuality and that type of thing, what's his name? I'm sorry.
Darrel Ray. Darrel Ray.
Darrel Ray.
Mm-hmm.
And he's perfect.
So, when I was growing up, I noticed some things about me. One of them that I was pacifistic. The other that I wanted to try to never lie. But also that the last time I had appropriate attractions was 9th grade, and upon entering 10th grade, which was when high school started, I found I wasn't attracted. So I thought that God was calling me to the ministry. He gave me a sexuality that... Sorry.
No,
okay.
it's all right,
He
Rob.
gave me a sexuality that wasn't acceptable because he didn't want me to get married. He made me a pacifist so I would be a good and faithful servant. And I'm not referring to it directly, even though it's obvious, because it's not what people think. I have been in love 3 times in my life, 2 times in my adult life, and like an old couple growing up together, once I love somebody, that age limit doesn't apply anymore. A 10-year off and on relationship just ended. I'm not Catholic or something like that. I'm Protestant, so I did plan to get married at some point. And because I was young, and she's within a year of my age, we're both about 30 now. I've had this relationship for 11 or 12 years now, and last year she came out as asexual. And even because I love her, and there's only one other person, I will be attracted to them for the rest of my life in the same way a husband is attracted to a wife. But there isn't anyone my age I'm attracted to. And if I'm not going to be a preacher, I'm scared. I've been a wandering preacher because I'm neurologically atypical. I don't want to say how because I don't want people to associate that with my sexuality. Because they have it hard enough. They don't need people thinking they're that. And I do have a job now. It's at a fast food place, but I'm getting garnished from my attempt at college, so I'm only making $6.50 an hour. So I'm still homeless, and I don't want to die in my car alone or live a very long life completely alone, needing to pretend to everyone I'm asexual when I'm actually pedophilic.
So I appreciate you sharing all that, Rob, and it's definitely a lot to take in, and I'm not in any way qualified. I would definitely suggest that you reach out to seculartherapy.org, but let me take a stab at a couple of things real quick. One, all of the things that you've experienced about who you are, you have done it all in the context of religion. That when you find out you're not the way you thought you should be, it's because God did this to you. God made you a pacifist so you would be a good and faithful servant. But maybe you're a pacifist because that's your nature and you are fundamentally avoiding conflicts, and it has nothing to do with the God. When it comes to things like sexual attraction, one of the things that I've been repeatedly kind of hammering home, and we even talked about it on Secular Sexuality on Thursday, is that you are not responsible for what you are attracted to. You're only responsible for the actions you take on behalf of it. Right. So if I were attracted to men, if I were attracted to women, if I were attracted to people of a certain age group, if I were attracted to blondes, if I were attracted to a telephone booth, because there are people who are objectophiles, that's about what my brain is telling me is stimulating. That is independent from the actions that we take. And I've been trying to encourage people to stop using the pedophile label as a pejorative, because there are countless people who have attraction to people, inappropriate attractions to people who are underage, who can't consent, and they never act on it because they have another part of their brain that says, no, that's wrong and I'm not going to do that. Right. And the same people that there are psychopaths that manage to not run around killing anybody, and some of them have had debates. This is difficult because you're in dire straits. You're living in your car. You're barely making enough to survive, and it's clear that you need help. Is there? Do you have a community there that you can reach out to, friends and family? Even I'm not trying to say don't go to the church, but if you're in a position where you absolutely need help, you've got to find a community in your local area that might be able to give you an advantage in being able to work towards recovery.
Well, Podunk, Georgia is pretty hard. Literally, the reason I needed to leave school is because someone told. I don't know how, but someone told, and I'm not willing to lie. And my advisor ended up telling my instructors I didn't deserve to pass. And the girl I was going to marry, she found out because I wasn't willing to lie to her. And that ended what would have been a lifetime relationship. And there isn't a community here for someone like me. A homeless, autistic, pedophilic, atheistic person who takes 3 times as long to do most anything as anyone else if it involves a piece of paper.
Rob,
I haven't, yeah.
Could I ask? We aren't here to do therapy. We can't do that. But what I will say
yes,
is,
I understand.
I will say,
it's time to.
No. What I'm not blowing you up. I'm trying to say, practically every county in the United States has got a community mental health center. Have you gone to the community mental health center and asked for help?
Is it free?
It would be free for you. Yes.
No, I didn't even know that existed.
Okay, look it up, or call one of the mental health agencies in the state, and they'll direct you to the one closest to you. You've probably got a community mental health center within 30 to 50 miles of your house, maybe even closer. It could be around the corner. I don't know. I don't know where you live exactly. Community mental health.
My car.
Yeah, your car. Yeah, it literally could. So find the community mental health center. Go into their offices, talk to them a bit, and they'll do an intake on you, and they'll assess what they can do for you. Okay, that's probably that's probably the first thing I would ask you to do.
And the other thing that we I think we'd both recommend. I don't want to saddle the RFR chat people with more than they might be equipped for, but just the process of talking to people. Like in this call, you were open and honest, and you broke down. And I think almost everybody. I can't imagine that there's too many people who didn't feel that and weren't moved by what you said. But those sorts of conversations, you're going to need to have a lot of them. And one place to start, if you have no other community, or even if you do, is recoveringfromreligion.org. Right. There's an option there to chat. Definitely visit your community mental health center. And, you know, while we don't necessarily, you may not be in a position, and we're not saying, hey, call in and give us updates frequently, at least touch base back with us and let us know how things are going. How did the community mental health center work out for you? Because I'd like to know that your life is getting better. Nobody wants to see anybody suffering in the way that you are clearly suffering.
Right.
Okay. Thank you for taking the call.
You're welcome, Rob. And
thank you, Rob.
Best wishes to you. Get the help you need.
Wow.
That was intense.
Yeah. It's rough.
He's really going through a lot right now.
And it's you know, he touched on a ton of issues that both you and I have talked about just this week on a couple of other shows.
Yeah, right.
And it's a point of frustration because I knew somebody, perhaps not identical to Rob, but I knew somebody who was a pedophile, was attracted to children, and it drove them mad because the other part of their brain was like, there has to be something wrong with me. They never, ever acted upon it because there was like a check valve in their brain, and yet they can't talk to anybody. They've literally done nothing wrong.
Right.
Now, others have. And it's because others have that this is kind of stigmatized. But it's such a hot button topic that they can't even get help.
Right, yeah.
And that's, you know, I'm back to the let's provide health care and especially mental health care to everybody on the fucking planet.
Yeah.
And let's stop beating people up for the fact that their brain does some weird shit.
Yeah. There's more than just that. There's so many things we think about and that could be crimes. I mean, every human being probably has thought about murdering their boss. and I'm using
my boss is an asshole who has no business running a business, but I'm my own boss.
We've all done that, and yet we condemn only certain pieces. I think we all should realize there's parts of our brain that could be bad, could be evil, could be harmful. And it's a wonder. It's wonderful that we've got other parts of our brain that help hold that in check. And Rob sounds like he's doing a good job of holding it in check, but he needs help with keeping it there.
Yeah. And by the way, that goes for other people as well. Darrel gave an excellent tip to go seek out your community mental health center. If you find out there's not one, I would say that maybe it's time to go talk to the city council, something along those lines, to say that, hey, we're failing to help the people who are most in need.
Right.
I know that's become the trend lately, that nobody seems to want to recognize that we're failing to help people in need because we're focused on 50,000 other things. And maybe it's because we've got kids locked up in cages, or maybe it's because there are just general jackassery. All right, you don't have to pay for that one. But I know at some point, either on this show or another show, we're going to end up talking about morality. It's unavoidable. And what I find is that, so atheism is not a religion. It's not a system. It doesn't have any tenets, any dogmas. It is a single position on a single issue. Are you convinced there's a God? If so, then you're a theist. If you're not convinced, then you're an atheist. Sorry, Steve. But thanks, Mark. The thing is, there are models of how to get along. Secular humanism is the model that I've advocated for the most. I mean, I'm a skeptic, I'm a humanist, and I'm an atheist. And of those, I would say that the skeptic part is the most important because it's the one that informs the other. And the humanist part is actually the second most important.
Right.
Whether or not I believe in God, well, whatever.
Yeah.
If we have a model that encourages people to be compassionate, to work towards creating a better world, to realize that as far as we can tell, there's not a God that's going to intervene on our behalf, and so we've got to get dirty, get our hands dirty, and do the work ourselves. Because if we sit around, praying for the world to change. Well, that's why we have people who are constantly victims of mass shootings, because when we're done with a mass shooting, we send out thoughts and prayers, and then we go right back to business.
Yeah, right.
And there are ways to do better. It's one of the, none of us are perfect. I don't care what Darrel says. He's not actually perfect. Pretty close. And he gave some really good advice there. But building a better world is the goal of secular humanism. I would also say it's the goal of most religious ideologies. It's just that what their perception of a better world is fundamentally different from ours.
Yeah, yeah.
On that note, we'll see Amber in California. You're on with Dr. Darrel Ray.
Hey, thank you for having me on the show. I wanted to talk about religious trauma that I had for my childhood. And I did not know that was already being discussed today. So perfect.
It's like God wanted you to tune in to this show.
Oh, my God, no. But my parents were fundamentalist Christian that kind of have a messianic twist to them, even though they're like not Jewish at all. Kind of a weird thing. But we were all homeschooled. I'm the oldest of four, and we were all homeschooled and shamed, and the whole 9 yards, basically.
Mm-hmm.
The 3 girls, 1 guy. The guy where my brother is considered, to have more. He's allowed a lot more. He's allowed to have friends. We aren't allowed, or at least I wasn't allowed to have any friends. I couldn't have any outside influences, even Christian friends, because they're not real Christians, according to my mother.
So now we're rapidly approaching into cult-like behavior.
Yeah, it sounds like it. How old are you, Amber?
Oh, I'm 21.
Okay, and you're out of the house now?
I left one day and I didn't come back.
Okay, and you're financially on your own?
Yeah. When I left to go live with my grandmother one day, my parents took all the money out of my account, so they literally left me with nothing. I got a voicemail from my dad saying that, I was a credit, or I could harm his credit because of my erratic behavior, and that's why he shut down my account, took all my money out of it. And he didn't want to speak with me as far as religious things go, because, he'd rather see me out on the street, as he put it. So, than him be wrong.
Well, feel the love.
Yeah, that's pretty tough to go through, Amber. I'm sorry to hear that.
Well, I mean, it was a long time coming, honestly. They won't let my sister go to college to be an orthopedic surgeon. They want her to go be a nurse. Huh. So, yeah, no, she's 16 and ready to go to college already.
Wow, she's a bright
I'm gonna say something, which I suspect won't bother you that much, but fuck them.
Oh yeah.
Oh, I'd like to be an orthopedic surgeon. No, I'm sorry, honey. You have a vagina. You must be a nurse. As if that's remotely relevant.
Yeah. Well, I left. The main thing why I left, I was 18 and I started to meet this guy, and he wasn't Christian at the time, but I was dating this guy, and I didn't tell my parents about it because I knew that they would, have a lot of problems with it. And they eventually found out, and they said that my grandmother, who had always told me to follow my own, my own way, she poisoned my head, and that I had to ask my dad for permission to start dating, and they made me break up with him. So, I could either, stay in the house and break up with him, or I could, be on my own. So I broke up with him, and they immediately went on to Christian Mingle and signed me up on that account, and we started picking somebody for me to date.
Oh my gosh.
After that, after about 3 days of this, I decided not to come home anymore. And I just left after my shift. I just left with my boyfriend, and who became later my husband.
Yay.
After a while. Yeah, happily married. He at this time, where my boyfriend, now husband, had decided to like become Christian, as I was, and I decided to keep my faith for a while. Eventually lost it. Now I'm a Satanist.
Hooray! Good.
So what is your current emotional situation? How are you dealing with your family, your parents, your husband?
It's hard sometimes because, I was homeschooled. I wasn't allowed to have friends. My mother was very, very controlling.
Uh-huh.
She, at one point, didn't allow me outside because, the guy next door liked me. And she thought I would immediately, whore myself out, as she put it, and climb over the fence, get myself pregnant. So, yeah.
So you are dealing with probably, and let me just guess, you're probably dealing with some revelations about how the world really works and some of the knowledge you missed by being homeschooled. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's just a giant hole where, like, a childhood should be.
Right.
Most of my childhood cleaning. So,
Wow. Well, I'm just concerned about where you are emotionally, how you're dealing with it. You sound like, do you have a good supportive husband?
Yes.
Is he supportive of your Satanist worldview?
Yes. He's atheist himself now, and he's not quite Satanist, but it's pretty much all in the same boat.
Well, there you go. I love the Satanists. Some of my best friends are Satanists.
Some of the best advocates for church-state separation are Satanists.
I have a little card that I got laminated. I got an official Temple of Satan card that I can just pull out and whip out at any time.
There you go.
Yeah. It's been super hard. I didn't know how to deal with people at all, or talk to people, or carry on a conversation, or, look people in the eye, and my parents would be very upset with me because, I'd be ostracized by my coworkers because it was very weird. And they'd be upset with me for not being a normal human when they raised me to be as isolated as possible.
Right. Okay. So you are currently still struggling, what I'm guessing, with social skills in certain social situations. Yeah. Okay.
I mean, obviously, I've gotten way better at it, but when somebody is mad at me, my initial reaction is to think it's all my fault and then be very depressed.
So you can see the programming that women are secondary to men and yeah, okay. But you're recognizing that, and it sounds like you're dealing with it. Do you have
I've had to recognize it. Yeah, go ahead.
Good. Well, I would just say it sounds like you've got work to do, but you recognize you've got work to do, and that's like 80% of the battle, because you can't even start working on yourself until you recognize. Here's the holes here's my education, holes in my family background. And and I hope you find a way to move on, let your parents go, don't dwell on how they raised you, because you can't do anything about that. Look in the future. Is there anything you're doing specifically, like joining social groups or another women's group, or something that's going to get you in touch with people who've got the skills you want to learn?
No, not exactly. I mean, I very much should. I still keep a contact with my parents because they won't let me be near my siblings by themselves because, worldly influences.
Right.
I don't know. But they very much need me, and they're of the mind that none of their kids could possibly ever have like mental issues or ADD or anything. So
your parents' delusions run deep.
Yes, they do.
But it sounds like you're concerned with your siblings more than your parents at this point in time.
Honestly, my parents are a lost cause.
Yeah,
I came out to them as bi, and they called me an abomination. So I was just like,
Okay.
you know what, this isn't going to change. You know, they were upset that I dare mention the word bi in front of my siblings
Ah,
or
okay.
anything like that.
Well,
So it's
welcome
that-
to the rest of us abominations. I'll join the club, and you can join the club. But
Two
good-
little letters to terrify parents. I'm bi.
Oh, yeah,
That's for.
exactly.
Good. Let me just say, good for you that you are concerned about your siblings, and I want to say that's a good thing. They probably could use your help, and not all of them will accept your help eventually. But as long as you keep a little spot open in your life for them, that's good for them. However, do not let your parents use your love for your siblings to manipulate you. Is that happening?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's been trying to happening. Like my grandmother took me in, they won't let her see the kids at all, but they keep telling the kids that she's welcome to come down to see them at any time.
Uh-huh.
But they won't let her.
So
They won't give her.
Okay. Well, you can let them know the truth whenever you're in contact with them, maybe. But the main thing is do not let your parents continue to manipulate your life. At some point in time, and you're 21, at 21, you should start being your own adult. You've got your own support system, and you're going to keep a little spot open for your siblings. When they get old enough to leave home, you're going to be there to help them, because I'm guessing you don't want them to leave with the same social deficits that you had. You're willing to offer yourself and your time and your emotional support to them when it's time. Is that correct?
100%.
Good. Well, good for you. But don't let your parents manipulate you. That's the bottom line. What it does is it perpetuates the trauma that the very first thing you mentioned practically when you called in. It helps perpetuate that trauma. And you're trying to get rid of the trauma. You don't want to wait until you're 27 years old and your siblings are all out for you to start dealing with the trauma. You need to start dealing with it now.
Yeah, the one thing to remember, I love the fact that, you're concerned about your siblings, letting them know that you're not going to judge them, that you are always there for them, and if they need a place, if they change their mind or whatever, or if they need to get out, you're there for them. But that means that you absolutely have to take care of yourself so that you can be there for them.
Exactly. I agree 100%. Like my sister knows she can, come over at any time, stay as long as she needs. But it's the others, because every time somebody leaves, they're always saying, oh, this person's on drugs. This person, is out there committing crimes. This is what happens when you leave our house, kind of deal. So
that's the way a cult operates.
I love that over the course of the call, their concerns, in the order that you listed them, crimes was third, but sex and drugs were number one and number two.
Oh yeah, especially for a woman.
I'm a fan of sex and drugs, not a fan of crime.
I am too. I enjoy all of them, but yeah. It's because of that. It's kind of disenfranchised, so I can tell them what exactly happened. But at this point, they're believing my parents more than anything, and I can't expect them to do anything else at this point.
Right. It makes perfect sense. Well, Amber, I appreciate the call. We got a few more callers to get to before we've used up all of Darrel's time. But thank you so much for touching base with us.
Yeah, thanks for calling in.
Thank you for having me on. You guys have a great day.
Yes,
you too. Yeah, it's it's always nice because I had a great childhood. It's one of the reasons why I wasn't particularly mad. I gave my parents a lot of slack on stuff. I didn't have to go through what a lot of other people have gone through. Mm-hmm. And, when I hear a story like Amber's about, essentially...
Her children are practically in prison, and she wants to get them out of that prison. You can't blame her for that.
Her siblings.
Her siblings. Yeah. I mean, her siblings, yeah.
But, we both know of people... in particular, I was reminded of Tracy Lockwood's story of... Anybody seen the M. Night Shyamalan movie, The Village? Yeah, when she saw that, she said it was kind of like a documentary. Wow. She had been raised in such a closed-off environment that when she finally escaped, she had no real concept of what money was or how to buy things or earn money or do things. Huh. That's the level that some of them go to. So even when I hear a story like Amber's that is, very cult-like in that you're not allowed to have friends, and we're going to homeschool you, and you're not going to do this, and now we're going to sign you up on Christian Mingle and find you a future husband. I'm not sure they actually know how Christian Mingle works, because the stories I've heard is that it's kind of like Grindr for Christians, or at least partially so.
There was something, going back to a caller, Rob, he used a term twice that I just want to make sure we're clear on. He called it, he said the Clergy Project twice.
Right.
And sometimes people get Clergy Project confused with Recovering from Religion. Clergy Project is for clergy. If you're a clergy person thinking about leaving or wanting help, go to the Clergy Project. Or you can come to us, but we're going to send you to the Clergy Project. We're two different entities, and we support each other a lot.
Yeah,
we work very closely together. We're definitely two different entities that aren't legally related.
I wasn't sure if he was confusing the two, or if he was talking, going to make a point about the Clergy Project that he never really got to.
I don't know.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Clergy Project, by the way, was started by Daniel Dennett, Linda Lascola, in cooperation with Dan Barker, as part of a study on clergy people who no longer believe, and it turned into an online forum where they can anonymously communicate. Some of them are still involved in the clergy, some of them are out now. Famously, my very good friend Jerry DeWitt. Jerry, if you're listening, you can call in and talk to me and Darrel. But he was the first person in the Clergy Project to shed his anonymity and come out publicly. And wrote a book, Hope After Faith. We've had him around here. It's a great project, but it's very narrowly focused.
It's just for clergy.
Yeah.
And we get clergy calling us, and we say, do you know about the Clergy Project? We had one just the other day from, I believe, New Zealand, said, wow, I didn't even know it existed, and we sent them on. That's what
that's because you live in New Zealand.
Yeah.
Which I'm not mocking, because I wish I lived in New Zealand quite often. I loved the time I got to spend in New Zealand. I can't wait for an opportunity to come back. Hint, hint, hint to my New Zealand friends. All right, we got a couple more calls I want to get to before we're done here today. David in Texas says there has to be a creator. You're on with Matt and Dr. Darrel Ray.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, yes. Yeah, I'm David. I'm a deist. I'm not actually a theist. I used to be Christian, but then I gave up that belief. So now I just believe that there's a creator God, but I don't really believe in any certain religion.
Okay. Why do you believe in a creator God, and what do you know about this God? What are its properties, or what does it want?
Well, okay, so why do I believe in him? Well, for instance...
How did you know it's a him?
Well, I don't know. I don't even know. I don't even assign gender to it, really.
Okay.
My beliefs are kind of muddy at this point, because I just believe... Okay, so I believe in a creator God because the universe changes. And it's like, okay, so my idea is that, like, something can't be changing forever. There has to be a point at which it started and at which events started to happen.
Okay.
Because the fact that the universe changes means there was a point at which it was one way, and then because, like, essentially the universe develops over time. And if you go back, all the way back in time, then you should get to a point where the universe just doesn't exist.
Yeah, but time doesn't exist at that point either under the current models. But the big thing is, if we were to go down the path that you're suggesting, which is at some point something happened that resulted in the universe that we experience. I'm fine with the notion that something happened. I'm not fine with the notion of saying, oh, it was a God, because I don't have any information about what happened. I don't know if it's a multiverse solution. I don't know if it's just something that we can't ever figure out what the answer is. And so when somebody says to me, oh, there must have been a God that was the creator, it's the reason why I ask questions about, well, what do you know about this God? What does it want? What's it like? What are its qualities? Because at the end of the day, what I tend to find amongst deists is that they're advocating for a, air quotes, God that they know nothing about, can know nothing about, acknowledge that they can know nothing about it, and yet they're convinced that this thing must exist. And so really it seems to me to be relabeling there must be some explanation for the universe. I don't know what it is, but I'm going to call it God so that I'm less uncomfortable with not knowing.
Actually, I see what you're saying. That your point does make sense. Because, like, the thing is, it's just that the universe seems to have, like, it seems like there's an intelligence behind it. Like,
What makes you think that?
Well, for one thing, we have complicated beings called humans who can think and reason.
Sure, but that's something that occurred through natural processes over countless years. It's not like at the origin of the universe there were humans. If we immediately after the expansion of the universe, if we had thinking beings that seemed to pop into existence out of nowhere, well, now you might have something closer to an argument for an intelligent creator. But if what we have is the expansion of the universe with physical laws governing all the activity, and this just eventually leads, like if there was a God who wanted to create humans, and his plan is, I'll expand the universe and set in place natural laws that over the course of billions of years will ultimately result in thinking beings who can occupy part of one tiny planet in one solar system, which is one of millions of billions of solar systems and millions of billions of galaxies. Excuse me. That seems to be an absurd way to go about it. It reminds me of like a Rube Goldberg machine. And this is a la Tracy Harris talking about Wile E. Coyote wants to catch that roadrunner. And so he straps a hat on his head that's got a wheel on it, balances on a tightrope that runs down over this. He's got a fan blowing a sail and some birdseed that will explode and has lead in it, and all of this to try to catch a roadrunner. And yet, of course, it doesn't work. But it seems overly complicated if the goal was us. And even if that were the way that this went about, we still are in a position where we have zero evidence that any of this was intentionally designed, even if people get the impression that it has the appearance of design. I just released a video yesterday that talks about how the appearance of design is not design. If we knew something was designed, if we could demonstrate it was designed, we would not say it has the appearance of design. We would just say it's designed and here's the evidence. The mere recognition that we say it has the appearance of design is an admission that we should not be convinced that it's designed. In much the way that when I'm on stage doing magic, I give the appearance of the supernatural, but if anybody concluded that what I was actually doing was supernatural, they have failed because it's not.
I would.
Okay, I think. Yeah, I see what you're saying. I think all of it is just reluctant to give up my faith entirely because I'm scared of what the implications would be.
The implications of what?
Giving up faith in God.
Okay.
Right.
What do you think those implications are? So, because I'm somebody who no longer believes in a God, and I can tell you from my life whether or not the things that you're afraid of have happened to me or anybody else. So what is the concern if you don't believe in a God?
Well, makes the world seem like kind of a lonely place. To look like I'm one of those people who's not really connected to the people around me in the first place. So, like, if I like, it's like, it's like when I'm alone, when I'm by myself, I'm actually by myself. Like, with no one. Like, I can't reach out and be like, hello. Like, I can't reach out and be like, okay, God, are you there? And also...
But do you get an answer when you do that?
I don't.
Yeah.
David, what I would suggest is you've got what I call a placeholder God. Your social isolation, your feeling of need for other people is not being met, and you're scared to lose the last piece, which would be the God, the deist, the deity, or whatever. And I've known of many people who want to keep a placeholder God in their life. And I'm going to suggest that it also prevents you from looking at the fear of abandonment, of being lost, of not having contact, and maybe it prevents you from taking some assertive steps,
Yeah.
to help yourself. You know, as long as you got that place of God, at least I can talk to that God or pray to that God or whatever, but you're not doing the thing that you need to do to help yourself.
Exactly.
It's a fear of loss and a fear of not being able to move. I mean, once you drop the placeholder God, you're responsible.
Yeah. What happens is you're like, well, I'm alone, but as long as I've got God, I'm not alone. Except
Right.
that when you talk to God, you're not getting an answer, and it appears that you are alone. But what if recognizing that the God you're talking to, whether he exists or not, clearly isn't contributing to your life, isn't answering, isn't truly making you feel less lonely, and the second you give it up, that serves as the foundation for you to take the steps that might make sure that you're not lonely, because there are, 30, 40 people on the other side of the glass now, and there's some people in the back room. Many of them have come from all over the country. Some of them from, raise your hand if you're from out of the United States. Anybody here outside the United States? Not today. And we're building communities. But as long as people are saying, oh, no, I've got God, I don't know how you fix the issue. But I understand this isn't just a pure intellectual or a pure emotional exercise. There's something that's convinced you either that this God is real or that it's in your best interest to act as if this God is real. And neither one of those is in any way a demonstration of having a reasonable position on the issue. And so while I'm not going to say, oh, David, what's wrong with you? Give up God and you'll have all kinds of friends, because that's bizarre and absurd. There are plenty of lonely atheists. There are plenty of isolated atheists. There are plenty of people who, once they give up religion, fall into the trap of nihilism and depression and all of those things. Life is not all rosy on the other side of religion. But what it is it's real. And instead of relying on something that I have no good reason to believe exists, I'm fortunate. I have lots of people around. When last year when I decided to get divorced, there was a period of time where I sat around in my house.
Yeah.
And somebody was supposed to come over, and they didn't. And I sat there on my couch and I said, holy crap, I'm 49, I'm divorced, somebody was going to come over, now nobody's here. Is the rest of my life going to be sitting around in this house by myself with occasional trips up to the Atheist Community of Austin to do the TV show, and maybe, yes, I'll get to go do a magic show or get to do a lecture or a debate, but that personal level, am I just going to sit around here in my house? And 20 years ago, after I lost a job, I pretty much locked myself in a house for almost 18 months where I didn't interact that much with the outside world. I would pray and study and play video games, but I was obviously clinically depressed, even though it was never diagnosed. And I made a rule that when I finally got out of it, I made a rule that if I ever found myself in a bad situation like that, I was not allowed to spend more than 48 hours in my house alone. You can take a day, you can take 2 days, but after that, you have to get out and talk to somebody. Now, I don't know if this will work for everybody, but it's worked for me because while I have ups and downs like everybody else, most of the last year has been great. I have friends, I have intimate partners, and it's all because I put myself out there by refusing to stay home. I'm not going to say it's easy. It's a process of individual character, and I'm not trained to give you advice, and I don't know your life. I'm just asking you to consider the possibility that hanging on to a God, when you acknowledge that you really don't have a good reason and you're not getting anything back from it, might be the thing that's preventing you from addressing the other issues in your life. Exactly the same as Darrel was saying.
David, what are you doing to get out and interact with
We lost David. The phone call disconnected or he hung up. I hope that was helpful. I hope David, seeks a call Recovering from Religion.
Yes.
There are people there who actually have training who will probably, have more time to listen to you and figure out.
And they can connect you to a group that might meet his social needs.
Yeah. And, for all those people sitting out there saying, I feel the way David feels. Like I'm afraid to give up God, or worse, I'm the only atheist in my area. No, you're not.
Yeah.
I can't count the number of times somebody's called into the show and said, I live in this town and I'm the only atheist here. And while they're talking to me, I will Google that town's name and atheist, and there'll be organizations there and meetups and other stuff like that.
Right.
Google is God. Google knows everything. Learn to talk to Google. It's often a good resource to find things.
Yep. Right.
All right, so we got a couple more calls to get to, and then we're closing in on time. But I have Christian in Ohio. You're on with Matt and Dr. Darrel Ray. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? Wow, I'm thankful to be here.
Oh, we're happy to have you call. What would you? It says here your position is that morality can't be consistent without a religious guide.
I'm a little nervous, so I wrote like a short little paragraph I can read. And is that okay?
Yeah, go for it.
Go for it.
Okay, so my question is, does recognizing logic in something mean we have to act on it? For example, I recognize and can use a variety of data to prove that being a vegan is objectively better for the environment, certainly the animals, and even the individual in most cases. Now, even though I recognize this logic, is it wrong of me to not follow through and live my life according to this? And if it's not, why can't I, or anyone else for that matter, knowingly live in the falsehood of belief in a God if it allows me to live what I perceive as a better life subjectively?
Well, could you be wrong about what counts as a better life in your subjective view?
I'm kind of basing it on the idea that the subjective or that objective morality is based on the idea that we want to preserve the individualism of conscious creatures. So I don't think so.
So you're saying your subjective assessment of a better world couldn't be wrong?
I think not. Well,
we found the perfect person then, because Darrel's not perfect, but evidently you're convinced that you are, that your personal opinion about a better world couldn't possibly be wrong.
It could be wrong, but I'm basing it on science. I think it's as close to absolute as we can come.
Yeah, I wasn't talking about any specific position. I'm talking about the fact that you made this appeal to, why couldn't I live my life based on what I personally think is a better world? And I would argue that if you care about a better world, then that should be as data-driven as possible. We should be appealing to facts as much as possible. And certainly we should strive to be reasonable and consistent. But the problem is that for any individual position, we may have a bias that is preventing us from seeing what is truly the better world. And so this is one of the reasons why science doesn't operate in a vacuum. And by the way, to reference a call from Talk Heathen, science is not only not a religion, science doesn't do anything. Science is a collection of processes. It's the people that do things, and sometimes they're going to do it wrong. So when we say we have a finding of science, well, that's not a statement that this is true. Science doesn't make proclamations about truth. Science gives us the best explanations and models based on the currently available information, and it's subject to change. So yes, science is the best tool that we have, as far as I'm aware, to learn about the world, and logical reasoning based on evidence is the best way to guide our decisions. There are, though, and Sam Harris and I largely agree, but he's convinced that a la something like scientism, all of the questions of morality can be addressed. I largely agree with him, but one of the things that we may not ever be able to quantify and assess is something like empathy, which is foundational to understanding of morality, in the sense where you're talking about, animal rights. Clearly, you have extended empathy to some part or the whole of the animal kingdom that puts them on a level footing with humans. Other people might not be convinced that that is a moral component. And so if that's the case, then a discussion needs to be had, hopefully supported by evidence and reason. The question you asked at the start is, if something is logical, does that mean that we should do it? Mm-hmm. And I think that that's probably just vague enough that I don't think I can give a solid answer. The intuition is to say yes. But there's another intuition there, that there are plenty of things that are logical
that are wrong.
That
are really,
love isn't logical.
Right. Yeah.
And so if I'm in a relationship with someone and I'm trying to figure, okay, here's all the things about the relationship I already know, and based on past relationships, here's what's going to happen in the future. Let me sit down and do a cost-benefit analysis of how much time I'm willing to invest in this. That may not be the best way to go about establishing a relationship. And it may be that the best way to establish it is entirely about my subjective preference. I don't care how bad this might blow up in the future. I fucking love this person, and I'm going to spend time with them. I don't necessarily see a problem with that as long as one is realistic about the potential consequences. I know that kind of diverged a bit from what we're talking about. I don't think morality is as hard as some people make it, but I don't think it's simple enough to say, oh, well, here's the logic, here's the evidence, now we're done. Because I'm not convinced that we are in a position where we can understand the entirety of a complicated subject to the point where we can simplify it to that extent. Does that kind of answer you?
I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying, but like to tie it back in with the veganism thing, I can demonstrate scientifically that it's the second largest contributor to climate change. So why would it not be morally in our best interest to not partake in something we don't have to? Hello?
Yeah. So
you're
you're convinced of something that somebody else might not be convinced of.
But
now,
but it was. But
no,
but if I use science to, sorry.
You're convinced of something because you have findings of science. Now, I had a long discussion with Alex O'Connor, 2 hours, and a good chunk of it was about morality, and some portion of it was about animal rights and veganism and stuff like that. And it was an off-the-cuff conversation where I hadn't bothered to look into things. Alex made some of these points talking about how going vegan may be the best thing you can do to actually fight climate change. And he cited a number of references. Obviously, we're just sitting on a couch and we didn't have time to look into it. I've since had some time to look into it. And while there is some validity to the points that he was making, there are also objections to those points, which I haven't studied up on and don't have a way to go through it. If it turns out that eating meat, the process by which we go about it, et cetera, is ultimately going to kill us all, whether it's through climate change or whatever else, then of course we should stop doing that. The problem is that I'm not yet convinced that's the case. Other people are.
Okay, but I mean, I'm not trying to.
Well, no, it seems what you're trying to do is to call in and talk about morality when you really wanted to talk about veganism.
Well, but I'm saying I see a moral contradiction in these.
And I don't.
See how you.
And I don't. And I've explained it many, many times, including that conversation with Alex. Have you watched that conversation?
I haven't, but I'll definitely look into it.
Yeah.
But
my view of morality involves essentially a contract that is based on the notion of moral virtues and moral obligations. There are cases where if you don't take a certain action, it is necessarily immoral. And there are other cases where it's not immoral to not take the action, but it may be morally virtuous. If there's a kid standing in the street and a bus is coming and it will cost me nothing and I'm at no risk to reach out and grab that child and pull them in, I would argue that I have a moral obligation, a moral duty to do that. But if it would involve me putting myself at risk, I may not have a moral duty, but it might still be morally virtuous of me to make that attempt. It might even be morally virtuous of me to sacrifice my own life in order to save that other person. And so with those differences, I have a moral contract that is undeniably speciesist. I draw a line at independent species because just because there's a human being whose maybe brain doesn't function even on the level of a grasshopper, that doesn't mean that they're not that they are without value because they have value to other humans, et cetera. I'm willing to extend that and to extend different rights and different moral contracts to a variety of different species. I'd put dolphins and great apes and other stuff in a completely different category from grasshoppers. And anybody who doesn't, I think is nuts. But where we draw the line, and I could be wrong. I'm not saying that as a dismissal of the thing. Where we draw the line is something we're still working on. And I'm not where you are necessarily yet. And this is not my issue. So I haven't spent much time on it.
Oh, yeah, that's fair, and I understand. But I just have kind of a question you said. So you said you would recognize that not eating meat is probably a morally more virtuous position.
No, I didn't say anything at all about not eating meat probably being a more virtuous position. I said that it may be the case that not eating meat is the more morally virtuous position.
Maybe you don't think that that's kind of obvious?
No. You could be a more morally virtuous person if you don't eat meat, but that doesn't mean that I am an immoral person for eating meat. Do you think that eating meat is immoral?
Not if you need to.
Okay.
But
what if you just want to? Is it immoral then?
I would argue if you have other options, if you're in an industrialized society, then yes, because you're knowingly choosing to do something that's causing harm to conscious beings.
So, no, I'm not. No, I'm not. Eating meat does not cause harm to conscious beings. If I find a deer on the side of the road and I eat that, I didn't cause that deer any harm. So is eating meat immoral?
Eating meat if the animal was dead due to natural causes, no. But if you are
so we're in agreement. Merely eating meat is not immoral. And so now the question becomes, when does it become immoral? And that's something that I'm not necessarily convinced of. Am I opposed to many of the harmful practices of factory farming and everything else? Yes. Am I opposed to somebody going out into their 400 acres and shooting a deer and eating it? No.
So essentially what you're saying is, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're saying that it depends on the context of in which you're eating meat.
Well, the eating meat part is irrelevant. It's the other actions that contribute to moral questions, not the eating of the meat.
But you don't think that it's kind of obvious that...
I don't give it... Okay, let's stop right now. Kind of obvious is not an argument. It's an assertion of opinion. I want arguments and evidence, not it's kind of obvious, because clearly it's not kind of obvious to me. But we have to move on because we're over time. Go watch the video on Alex, and you can email me, and I'll be happy to talk about it some more. But I got one more call to get to, so thanks for the call. Appreciate it. We have Luciano, who I want to apologize to. You've waited on hold from the beginning of the show, and one of the reasons that I didn't take the call earlier was because I either misread what the call screener wrote, or they wrote it wrong and corrected it. Because what it says now is Luciano has a proof for his pantheistic God. But what I read earlier was Luciano has proof for his pathetic God.
No.
And I was like, why would I want to take that call?
Well, I guess he's pathetic since I am pantheistic.
I'm not saying pantheistic gods aren't pathetic, but in any case, you will be today's final call. Welcome to the show with Darrel Ray and Matt Dillahunty.
Thank you so much for having me, first of all. I'm kind of nervous. I've never been on any show, or radio, or anything.
Well, I haven't really hung up on anybody today, so you're probably safe.
I saw that. I heard everything.
I had a good day yesterday.
Well, this isn't going to be an emotional call, so I won't. That was pretty intense. But I'm from Argentina. I'm in Florida now, Jacksonville.
Because we can't put up a wall around Florida. You can't make Argentina pay for a wall.
Yeah, that's one of the things that exactly, pay for a wall. I don't really want to buy a wall here.
I'm glad you made it here before we excluded Argentina from immigration as well.
And I I was there in Argentina. I loved it.
Anyway,
cool.
Jokes aside, go ahead and let's get to your pantheistic God proof.
Okay, so anyway, so I get straight to the point. I started writing just now, like a whole page, almost and a half, and I have things from the past, I think, 6 years. I was raised a Catholic, first of all. I was baptized, confirmed, and I forget the other one, when you're like 12 or before that.
I thought that was confirmation.
I did communion.
Okay.
Yeah, communion, confirmation. Yeah.
Yep.
That's how that works. So anyway, so my whole family is Catholic. I have a Cuban uncle. Everybody else is Argentinian. So it's very tight-knit. They're, it's like a wolf pack. From, I guess you want to look at it like that. Anyway, so I'm I try to be open-minded. I used to be pretty close-minded guy to a lot of things. I like, heavy metal and things like that. I don't really, I argue with a lot of people because they don't get it. they're like, you're Argentinian and you do the opposite of what everybody else that I met there. I'm like, oh, yeah, well, that's me. But anyway, so I don't believe in marriage or sin, heaven or hell. But I do believe that science has proof for not the existence of a God, but I believe that the universe is part of God.
Well, hang on. Just for clarity, there's two different labels here that often get confused. There's pantheism, and then there's panentheism. And so, pantheism is the notion that the universe and God are the same, and panentheism is the notion that God transcends the universe but manifests within it.
Yeah, the first one.
Okay, so you think the universe is God?
Yes.
Why would we ever bother why would we bother to call the universe God when we could just say it's the universe? What are you adding to universe that gets you to God?
Okay, so the reason that I guess, God is like most people would say like an almighty being that might come back, and depending on if it's Christian, might come back. Sorry, and if you're Muslim, race Muslim, then you think that the opposite or whatever, like Allah is going to come back or whatever. So I haven't looked too much into that one, but I have experience in high school and in a special class that was religious studies. I forget the real name, but something like that. I learned about Zoroastrianism, Buddhism, all the different religions. So I started to question my own religion because I was like, what the heck, I had no clue about all this.
Yep.
I was raised in a household where both my parents were like very strict, and my father yelled a lot, and I felt like I was walking on eggshells. And I still like right now, like I'm nervous because I don't really like to express too many of my personal things. I'm more of a private person.
Good, because Luciano, we're way over time, and so your personal story, as much as I'd love to talk to you for a long time if we had it.
I'll get over that now.
Just what is it that you believe and why, as succinctly as possible?
Okay. So I believe that because of, I'm on the website right now, but because of numbers that I see and because of things that exist around us, like I'm going to give examples real quick and then you can tell me what you think.
Okay.
I hope it doesn't sound too outlandish, but there's one called HARP.org. It's weather manipulation and earthquake. They can actually shoot from up in space or whatever, people believe. Some people, I don't know what about the flat earth thing. I just heard about it. So I'm not going to say that that's true. I don't really believe in that. But
okay, we're still on things you don't believe. I need to know what you believe and why, and I don't know how weather stuff.
I'm getting there. I'm sorry. I'm kind of long-winded, everybody. Okay.
Me too.
So here it is. So
I'm not supposed to laugh that hard.
It's hard not to.
Okay, here it is. Yeah, I'm thinking too deep. Let me see. Okay, so CERN, there's a home.cern.com. There's a Large Hadron Collider underground in different parts of the world. The first one was in Vienna, Austria. And it's underground. There's a huge circular
I know what CERN is.
Their logo has and their logo has 666 on it in the front. And I always see numbers like that. I see 16666. No, sorry, 16666.
What the hell's that have to do with anything?
566666. No, combining those.
When I get to my house, I see a 9, a 6, and a 4.
Okay.
Why are you putting?
Okay, I'm going to get to the point.
Hang on. I have a question.
Yes. Yeah.
What's significant about 666? It's a number. It's one more than 665 and one less than 667. Okay.
Yeah, I understand.
But if you you have no. Stop. We're talking about pantheism. You think the universe is essentially God. And in order to reach this conclusion, why the fuck would you ever start with biblical mythology that you reject? Instead, why didn't you start with Harry Potter mythology? Why didn't you start with what numbers are significant in Hinduism?
I can go with that too. I have a mark on my forehead that I got that looks just like the Harry Potter's card that I got as an accident. And the only way I've ever been hurt is accidentally.
Okay.
I don't know if it's because of my name. I'm just saying, like, it's just,
you are missing the point.
I feel like things. I understand where you're coming from.
I bet you don't.
I'm getting to it slowly. It's just taking a while.
I don't have any more time.
I have a lot of.
What is significant? Why is let's say I found a 666 on something.
Mm-hmm.
What the fuck does that have to do with whether or not the universe is God?
Okay, because of this. Okay, so the symbols Christian symbols and the things that have been found, all can be cubes. Like the cross can be folded into a cube.
All right,
the Jewish
stop, Luciano.
Yes.
We're done. I'm going to give you homework.
Okay.
Go look up phi, P-H-I, and look up golden ratio.
I know about that.
Okay. People can find patterns. There are patterns that occur in nature. You can find whatever patterns you want. None of those patterns are ever going to tell you that the universe is God. And if you appeal to a particular religion's symbology while dismissing that religion in order to make your argument that the universe is God,
just one. I'm talking about all.
It doesn't matter if each one of them. Stop. If each one of them is similarly irrelevant, then you've piled up 50 things that are irrelevant. And adding a 51st thing that's irrelevant doesn't get you 1 centimeter closer to the thing you're trying to prove.
Okay, I see what you're saying. Okay.
And on that note, I got to go, but dig into those things. Call us back sometime. We do appreciate you calling. This is the thing, is that even people who were indoctrinated into a religion, you have a hard time getting rid of that baggage.
Definitely, yeah.
And so if you're convinced that there's some significance to the number 666 because it's in Christianity, and you find that there's the Hindus have a 13 billion year cycling calendar, which is far closer to the actual age of the universe, maybe I'll become a Hindu. Oh, wait, no, there's stuff in there I don't believe, but I'll keep these little baggage elements. Then I'll put them all together and just say the universe is God. Well, why not say the universe is the fucking universe?
Right.
Because whatever you've added to it is definitionally not the universe. Okay? If we want to say Matt is God, we have clearly added something to the definition of Matt that doesn't exist. It just doesn't work. And even if I had a 666 tattooed on my forehead, that doesn't tell you anything about whether or not the mythology surrounding a particular religion is true or reasonable to believe or anything else. I understand the frustration. Luciano is floundering about, I've given up Catholicism. What is there? It's the placeholder God you were talking about.
Exactly. And I want to underline something here. At 5 years old, when you probably are learning your religion, you're also learning your language. And they both are getting put in your head at the same time. When you get to be 25, you have the language, but you still have that religion, even if you dumped it years before. Yep. And that's the importance of working and working and working on yourself. He sounds like he dumped a whole lot of Catholicism, but he hasn't quite been able to let go of that other piece. These things get confused in our minds, just intertwined, the religion and language, among many other things. And he's got a lot of work to do. People like that have a lot of work to do oftentimes.
On that note, this brings us to the end of the show. I want to thank Dr. Darrel Ray for being down here today.
Thanks for having me on again.
Special thanks to the people on the other side of that wall who make the show happen. To all of you who are actually watching, the people who showed up here live, this is the atheist community of Austin, where you have a place. And after the show's over, we have food. I don't know what the hell's going on with food or whatever else, but the library is open from 11 to 9 virtually every single day of the week. There are many different programs going on. Darrel's been on like 80% of them at this point in one weekend. We appreciate your time. We'll be back next week with another episode. Until then, think and ask questions. And don't reach conclusions until you're really, really sure that you've created a rock-solid path from your suspicion to the conclusion. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.